possession.
I see it in two ways here at this point as well. I mean, I feel that this could be something external, obviously, that's very interesting. But I also think that, again, there's a connection with the inner world, the psyche, that this could actually be demons in a way that are actually coming out, or archetypes almost, if you will, that this is something inherent, something within a person that they haven't dealt with that is coming out. And consequently is playing out their role in the world or what have you. It might be some kind of processing that is going on. It's very much, I don't know how things are in more Eastern countries and so forth, but this thing just with the alcohol and the way, as we just talked about here, how this can play out, seems to be a very kind of Western thing, and it could be a kind of sign, if you will, of a very unbalanced psyche, that we have so much inherently, in the depths of us that we haven't dealt with, and this is the only way for that to come out, as sort of a form of exorcism, if you will.
I mean, you may be right. I mean, certainly, Henrik, I would never dismiss any hypothesis because, as I said, I'm a perennial student, so
right.
Anything that isn't proven is always open to be discussed. I mean, we have to make sure that we retain. So, if you like, the intellectual curiosity to keep exploring every possibility.
Yes.
One of the things that is very interesting to me is that, in the indigenous peoples, they tend not to have any kind of tolerance for alcohol. I mean, let's look at the problems, with the Aborigines, and also with, those from those who come out of, the Central and Southern American jungles. If we look at the descendants of the Maya and the Aztec, and we look at the descendants of some of the tribes from the Amazon, these people they find it very difficult to integrate into society because there's obviously no readiness to integrate from the colonizers. But the other thing is that they have zero tolerance for alcohol. So when they are drinking, perhaps they open themselves up almost immediately.
Could be, yeah. Definitely. I do want to ask you a little bit about the idea as well of when going into a lot of this research, as we were talking about here before, that I at least always held the idea that a spiritual awakening, if you will, needs to go hand in hand with the awakening of the world conspiracy of what really is going on in the world and all the stuff that's been hidden for you for so long. And I've always maintained that people who cannot find the balance of also, this must not perhaps go hand in hand, as it were, but just, it needs to be back to back, if you will, a few months, years down the road after looking at a lot of conspiracy research material. One needs to focus a little bit more about the spiritual side to all of this in order to maintain that balance within oneself. What do you think about that, Ian?
I think that's absolutely the case. And I think, for different people, one triggers the other. There's no right or wrong order. I mean, for some people, if you like, they start the spiritual journey first and they investigate the spiritual experience and integrate the spiritual experience, and then when they return and they focus on what's going on in the political arena, all of a sudden they see things through a completely different lens.
Yes.
And it's it's almost like my God, I now can actually see the connectivity of these things. And then again, I mean, that gives them obviously another problem. What do you do with it? Because nobody believes it. And this is why, I mean, I have said this in a number of presentations. Consider the possibility that, those who actually we perceive as driving this increasingly negative agenda, those who believe themselves to be the rightful rulers of this global fiefdom, let's use the umbrella term, those who perceive themselves to be an integral part of the New World Order.
Yes.
They may be doing us being humanity, they may be doing us a massive favor. Because what they're actually doing in their arrogance and their increasingly overt aggression is giving us an opportunity, to see through the veneer and the bullshit. whereas 30, 40 years ago, it was, much more clandestine. There was greater obfuscation. It was much more difficult to probe through. There were people probing through. I mean, Rudolf Steiner, if you look at a lot of what he was saying during the course of his lectures, he was sort of exposing the machinations. I mean, there was a series of lectures that he gave in 1916 and 17 called The Karma of Untruthfulness. And those series of lectures were focusing on the lies and the manipulations of governments to achieve particular ends. And of course, at that time, he was focusing on the events of the First World War, and also, interestingly, the events that led up to the Balfour Agreement, which, of course, was the formation of an Israeli or Jewish homeland.
Yes, yes.
So there's always been people who have been trying to raise awareness of it, but there hasn't necessarily been a big audience. But now what's happening is that these people are becoming so outrageously arrogant, and I think that they are trying to sort of show that actually it doesn't matter how many people see what they're doing, they can still get away with it. Well, our job is to ultimately show that ain't the case. And I think, as Neil Kramer said, it might not be the 100th monkey. It might not be the 100,000th monkey. It might be the millionth monkey. But more and more and more people are starting to see through the charade that is presented in the political arena. I mean, even this last incident, where, of course, the U.S. baited the Russians effectively to launch a new Cold War. I mean, all the Western media has been saying that the Russians invaded South Ossetia. But, I haven't yet spoken to anybody who is taking the media story at face value, because people have seen the evidence for themselves. They know the Americans had military advisors in Georgia immediately before Saakashvili launched the attack on South Ossetia. And, the Russians, because South Ossetia is a Russian enclave, the Russians went in there to defend their people. The Russians didn't go in there to invade Georgia. The Russians went in to defend the Russian enclave of South Ossetia.
Yes.
But the Americans obviously have tried to use it to launch a new Cold War. Why do they want a new Cold War? Because they need to kickstart their economy. And the only way they perceive they can do that is go back into an arms race. But you know what? People are seeing through it, which is fantastic. So these guys are doing us a favor. So, we have to, I think, actually sort of put things in perspective. And, if it wasn't for the outrageous behavior of these guys, it would actually be more difficult for us to, to be able to demonstrate, what's occurring.
Yes, and that's a very important point, that the New World Order is doing us in that regard a favor. And I'm talking here on another level, that they represent a challenge to us, that we shouldn't be taken down by the propaganda. We shouldn't be, scared into submission by all the lies and garbage that they throw out there. And when we do that, when we take that stance, so to speak, against that, a psychological stance, an agreement with oneself that no, this is crap, I'm moving away from that, I'm not looking at that anymore. It's a terrible, one gets terrible strength out of that. It's an incredible and important moment, I think, in one's life. And these guys here at the top, they really represent that challenge in a way. And to look only at the geopolitics of this, so to speak, to only look at that aspect and be, frightened to death and looking at how many, nukes they're planning to drop now on be it Iran or whatever, and what Cheney's up to, and only looking at that, I feel that that's definitely an important step. We always need to, keep an eye on that, what these guys are up to, what they're doing and so forth. But I feel that there's another level to this as well, and even the fact that we're just being so immersed in what it is that these people are doing all the time that we tend to forget our own lives and even what we are all about. That's a very that's a negative side to all of this. What do you think, Ian?
I think you're absolutely right. And again, it is absolutely keeping it in balance. But I think the realization of what's occurring on the bigger arena can actually trigger that reflection, because if you actually take a pace back and you go, my God, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah.
And then we actually start to question. I mean, and I think obviously, the spiritual journey is kicked off when eventually we ask ourselves the question, what is the